For 2 years of school, one boy made my life genuinely miserable. Chased me down the street, messed with my things, constant verbal abuse every single day from someone I couldn't get away from. I hadn't thought about him in years when I spotted a familiar face across a grocery store parking lot in my mid-20s. I walked over and said hello. He went white as a sheet, started trembling, and looked at me like he was absolutely certain he was about to be put in the ground. I had not planned any of this. I had simply kept growing. This is a story about a childhood bully, a quiet kid who took years to find his confidence, and the specific, beautiful justice of running into someone who wronged you after life has had a chance to rearrange things considerably. No confrontation, no speech, no revenge plot. Just a very tall man saying hello in a parking lot and watching someone else's conscience do all the work. Hit that like button, subscribe if you're new, and let me tell you about the most effortless moment of my adult life. Let me describe myself at 11 years old. I was tall, noticeably unusually tall for my age, around 5'8" at 11, which sounds like it should have been an advantage and was, in fact, the opposite. Height only means something when you use it. When you don't, when you spend your days drooped at the shoulders, eyes down, walking through hallways like you're trying to take up as little space as possible. Height is just a larger surface area for people to aim at. My self-confidence was, to put it generously, non-existent. I was a meek kid, quiet, avoidant, the kind of person who has learned that making yourself small is the safest strategy, even when your body physically can't comply with the instruction. I moved through school like someone perpetually bracing for impact, which made me, as these things tend to work, a very easy target. He was shorter than me, significantly shorter, which, looking back, probably had something to do with his particular interest in me. There's a specific kind of smaller kid who identifies a larger, meeker kid as the ideal target, because the contrast between size and submission is apparently irresistible to a certain type of person. I'll call him D. For 2 years, D made school something I dreaded. He messed with my belongings. He chased me down the street, threatening violence that kept me on edge even when I'd physically gotten away from him. The verbal abuse was constant, the kind that accumulates over months until you stop noticing individual incidents and just carry a general weight of dread that follows you everywhere. I want to be honest about what that does to a person. Not just in the moment, the specific fear of each day, but over time. 2 years of being treated like a target reshapes how you carry yourself, how you expect to be treated, how you walk into a room. And the confidence I lost in those 2 years took me much longer to rebuild than it had taken him to dismantle it. Halfway through my second year of high school, something shifted. I can't point to a single moment or specific event. It was more like a slow accumulation, reaching a tipping point, a day when I just decided, in some wordless internal way, that I was done making myself small. I straightened my back. I started walking like a person who had a right to take up space. I stopped waiting for the next impact and started just existing, upright and present, as myself. D had already moved on by then, as bullies tend to do when the dynamic stops feeding them. But the change I made wasn't about him. It was about me. About choosing, at 15 or 16, to be a different version of myself than the one I'd been performing for the previous 2 years. I've never had a significant problem with confidence since. The work of rebuilding it was real, but once it was rebuilt, it held. What I've always believed, though, and still believe, is that it could have happened sooner. Probably years sooner if I hadn't spent those 2 years learning to shrink. I should mention that I kept growing. And this is not a metaphor, though it also is a metaphor. I mean it literally. I kept growing well past the point when most people stop. By my mid-20s, the process had finished. I had reached 2 noticed weight meters. For those who prefer feet and inches, 6'10". I had gone from a 5'8", 11-year-old who walked like he was trying to disappear, to a 6'10" adult who had learned over years of necessary effort to walk like someone comfortable in his own skin. The two things together, the height and the confidence, produce a particular impression. I'm aware of this. When you're nearly 7 feet tall and you carry yourself with ease rather than apology, you occupy a room differently than most people do. It's not something I think about constantly, but I know it's there. D did not know this. He had not seen me since school. I was in my mid-20s, out for groceries, thinking about nothing in particular. And across the parking lot, I saw a face I recognized. It took me a moment. Years had passed and people change, but the recognition came, the specific click of placing someone from a different chapter of your life into the present. It was D. I want to be clear about my internal state at that moment. I had already forgiven him, genuinely, holding a grudge against the actions of a preteen, a child being cruel in the way that some children are cruel, probably for reasons that had nothing to do with me, had never seemed worth the energy. I wasn't carrying anger. I wasn't carrying anything, really, when it came to him. I walked over and said hello. What happened next was not something I engineered or anticipated. It was simply a man's face registering a very rapid sequence of information. He saw me coming. He recognized me. He looked up, and up, and up. and processed the full picture. The person he had spent 2 years chasing down streets and threatening and verbally dismantling had apparently not stopped at 5'8". The meek kid with the drooped shoulders was now 6'10", and walking toward him with the easy confidence of someone who had nothing to prove and nothing to fear. He went white, not metaphorically. His face drained of color with the specific speed of someone whose nervous system has just sent a very urgent message. He started to tremble slightly. Small, involuntary, visible. His eyes had the quality of someone running a rapid probability assessment and arriving at conclusions he didn't like. I said hello, asked how he was doing. I was genuinely friendly, warm even, because I had nothing against him. I had moved on years ago, and this was just a person I used to know, someone from a chapter that had closed. He managed some words. He mentioned that he had somewhere to be. He left at a pace that technically qualified as walking, but was trending urgently toward something faster. I watched him go and stood there for a moment with my grocery list. Here's the thing that I keep coming back to when I think about that afternoon. He had spent however many years carrying the expectation of consequences. At some level, in some part of his mind, he had known that what he did to me was wrong. Children who bully know. They might not have the vocabulary for it, might not articulate it clearly even to themselves, but they know. And so when he saw me walking toward him, large, confident, purposeful, he had assembled a story in his head about what was about to happen. He had imagined consequences. He had frightened himself with them. He had spent however long it took for his face to drain of color, preparing for something I had never intended and would never have delivered. The punishment he experienced in those 30 seconds was entirely self-administered. There is something almost philosophical about the way this resolved. I did not plan it. I did not engineer it. I did not arrive at that grocery store hoping to run into him, and I did not approach him with any agenda beyond the basic social instinct to acknowledge someone you recognize. I was friendly because I was fine, because years of building genuine confidence had left me with nothing to prove and nothing to settle, and that, precisely, is what undid him. He had a mental image of me as someone who could be terrorized, someone without resources or standing, someone who would flinch. He walked into a 6'10" adult who didn't flinch, had never been coming for him, and was entirely at peace. The version of me he'd built in his head, and the meek kid, the easy target, had been gone for over a decade. He just hadn't known until that parking lot. I think about what I would tell the 11-year-old version of myself, drooped shoulders, trying to take up less space than his body allowed. Probably just stand up straight. Not because of what anyone else will think, or what it will mean for some future encounter in a grocery store parking lot, just because you have a right to be exactly as tall as you are. And the sooner you act like it, the sooner it becomes true. The confidence was always available. It just took a while to find. The height was a bonus. If this story resonated, if you've ever had a moment where life rearranged things in exactly the right way without you having to do anything at all, smash that like button and drop a comment. Have you ever run into someone from your past and realized that time had already handled everything? I want every story. And if you want more tales of patience, growth, and the quiet satisfaction of just showing up, subscribe. New story every week. See you in the next one.